Welcome to video 2 for the VIPER mainframe emulator project. This video is not really going to be about code, even though most of them will be. But I wanted to talk about the reason why. I wanted to dig deeper into the reason why I started this project. COBOL execution on a non-mainframe is sketchy or prohibitively expensive. GNU COBOL exists. It's a good product. I tested it out. It's open source. Tons and tons of work has gone into it. I commend everybody that has contributed to that. It was one of the inspirations for the project that I'm doing, the VIPER mainframe emulator. The problem is it doesn't, and I found some other libraries and stuff, but it doesn't do VSAM files right out of the box, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, so let me know. But it doesn't do VSAM files right out of the box. So there's other libraries and stuff you have to install to get to VSAM functionality, and it doesn't do CICS functionality, CICS commands. And I'm not going to really get into CICS, but it's more of the interactive, when you think of mainframes, you think of green screens with black and white text and green text and tabbing around, no mouse, very blocky, 80 characters wide, 24 lines, 80 characters per line. That's CICS. They call it pseudo conversational way for the user to interact with the system as it's running, rather than batch processing. So GNU COBOL doesn't do that. Also, I mentioned in video 1, I am working with a legacy product right now. I tried compiling using the GNU COBOL compiler. I tried compiling actual code from our project, and it failed. Like there's some sort of command or code structure that GNU COBOL couldn't handle on one of the programs, and there's probably 500 or more programs in this particular project. So if I already found one that won't compile with GNU COBOL, it doesn't solve my problem. So I'm not taking anything away from GNU COBOL. It has been very inspirational for me, and it's a good tool if it works for you. So use it if it works. The second part is the prohibitively expensive. Micro Focus is a company that has been around for a few decades, writing a COBOL compiler for the PC. They don't even list the price on their website. Whenever you say how much does it, you click a link, how much does it cost? The answer is contact our salespeople. This is old school mainframe way of dealing with things. They don't want to tell a price right off the bat. They're like used car salesmen, or these house flipping shows. Well, what's your budget? Oh, good news. We can come in right at your budget. What? What is this? Tell me how much it costs, and then give me a trial. As far as I know, Microsoft or Micro Focus doesn't have a free trial unless you contact their salespeople. Let me get my hands on the product. Tell me how much it costs. Then I will decide if I want to buy it or not. But that's not how the mainframe world and the legacy world works. It's how much can you spend, and then guess what? Oh, it costs that much. So there's no good options that I saw. So I wanted to just clear the air on some things. This is why I'm doing this project. GNU COBOL, a great product. Again, very inspirational for me. The problem is I found certain programs, I don't know why, because I don't know that much about COBOL, but they wouldn't compile. So if it doesn't compile, it doesn't work. It doesn't solve my problem. And then I'm not going to open my wallet and say, well, this is how much money I have, and then give some company every penny that I have, because miraculously that's how much it costs. So let's make an open source product that does convert actual mainframe legacy code. That's why I wanted to get into this, and I hope that the feedback that you guys are going to give me after you watch these videos is going to help with this, and I'm hoping maybe somebody will be inspired and they want to help contribute to this open source project. Make a clone, make some changes, make a Git pull request, and let's get some other eyes on this. This has been me by myself for about 4 months. The code that I'm writing, it's okay. I'm not going to say it's great. It's definitely not what the Python community would consider Pythonic. But my main goal right now is get something out the door. Let's get something. Let's start to prove the hypothesis that this is possible. Once we can prove that it's possible, then we can make it the best that it can be. So I appreciate everybody watching these videos. There's a few people that have already, been watching the repo, its evolution. I hope that they are cloning it and doing git pulls every time I make commits and merges. But hey, can you be a contributor? That would be great. Let's make this the best that it can be. The other thing that I wanted to address is COBOL, just COBOL in general, and mainframes in general. When I started my IT career, I was a developer back in the 90s, right out of college. I learned COBOL in college. My first job was writing COBOL. I was there on Y2K. Like, I worked all night on New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. I was part of projects that were expanding 2-byte fields into 4-byte fields. Like, I lived it. And we had a failure overnight on Y2K because of this. We had to make a quick change and compile and push to production. At one point, or in one perspective, it was exciting, and in the other perspective, like New Year's Day of 2001, I said, "What is this? What am I doing? Why am I doing?" And I just vowed to get out of COBOL. So here I am, 20 years later, a little over 20 years later, and I'm back working, in COBOL. It's like stepping into a time capsule. I'm sorry if you're offended, or if you're insulted, or if you're angry, but it's like, there's no other way to say it. I got in the TARDIS, I went back in time, and I stepped out, and nothing has changed. And so I follow some, subreddits and whatnot for COBOL and the mainframe. And I follow some blogs, and I'm watching some YouTube videos that other people are putting together. And there is a contingent, a subsection of the developer population. They talk about how great COBOL is and how great mainframes are at solving problems and running fast. And it's so easy. And COBOL's natural language, so it makes it easy. And, all this stuff. And I just have to disagree. I'm sorry. I'm disagreeing with you. I'm trying to do it respectfully, but at the same time, I kind of don't care, because it's not good. It's just not good. And so I want to try to make some things good. Again, this is the quality of life of the developer, a typical developer on a mainframe. You don't have modern tools. You're not looking at modern screens where you can have multiple windows open. You can be doing, real-time compares between files. Sure, I get it. IDZ exists. If you don't know what IDZ is, it's an Eclipse-based editor that IBM made so that you can write COBOL. It's okay. It's Eclipse-based. Eclipse is an okay editor. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's Eclipse. But But the problem with that is it doesn't run locally. Every time you want to make a change, when you save a file, let's say well, first of all, I open up the COBOL program, the source code in IDZ. It goes to the mainframe and it downloads it from the mainframe. So I got to wait 1 or 2 seconds or more to open the file. Okay, so now a few seconds have gone by. I've waited. It's open. I make a change. I save it. Guess what? It's 1 or 2 seconds to save it because it doesn't save locally. It saves back up to the mainframe. Okay, now I want to run it. You have to use JCL. You can't just one button click run a COBOL program. You got to run. Well, first you got to compile it. That's its own JCL job, or if you have a tool like Endeavor, it's an SCL job. You got to wait for that to complete. 1 minute. I mean, it may take less than a minute for it to actually execute, but by the time you submit it to the queue, so I submit my job from IDZ, it goes to the mainframe and says, hey, by the way, I'm submitting this job. The mainframe queues it up. Everything in front of the queue has to execute before you get to mine. So if there's already a backup, now I got to wait even longer. It executes, and then it gives me the results of that job execution in a completely different place. I got to go look somewhere else at the job entry control system or whatever it's called, JES2, JES2. That's the acronym for it. I got to go look there, and I go, oh, which one is my job? And I look through the list of jobs, and I can filter by my ID or whatever. But it's just like minutes and seconds and just click after click after click. And I'm trying to go and find out what I'm doing. Like, it's just not a good experience. So, anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. I want to talk about just COBOL in general, like being out in the world. The production COBOL exists. Okay, fine. We admit it. And a lot of stuff is run by COBOL. Banking, telecom, insurance, travel, and government, right? There's your 5 big ones that are just still using COBOL. Okay, fine. Great. The defense of the COBOL supporters, this is a common defense. Oh, yeah, COBOL's not dead. Look at all the places where COBOL is used. That doesn't make it good, guys. No new projects are being started in COBOL. Let's admit that. Or, I mean, obviously, new projects are being started in COBOL. So you can't say all or none, or everything or nothing, or, those hyperbolic terms. But on the whole, COBOL projects, no projects are started in COBOL anymore. It's maintaining legacy code. It's not innovation. It's not creativity. It's not groundbreaking. ChatGPT was not written in COBOL, and it never will be. So it's not a defense of how good COBOL is to say COBOL has burrowed in like a tick, and we can't get it out. We've tried burning it. We've tried burning the pinhead and putting it next to the tick to try to get it out, and it still won't leave. And in fact, it only burrows deeper. That doesn't mean COBOL is good. So, I'm getting a little excited. I admit it. But I'm passionate about developer quality of life. I really am. And this is where it's coming from. So, if I can't get rid of COBOL quickly, can we make it better? The experience of using COBOL better. That's what this project is all about. Okay? And that's where GNU COBOL, again, it doesn't really address that problem. So I get it. GNU COBOL is just a compiler, so you can use an IDE and Visual Studio Code, and I'm sure other IDEs have COBOL language plugins, so you can do your syntax highlighting and your IntelliSense completion and things like that. So GNU COBOL doesn't do that. It's a compiler. Okay, it's one job and it does it well, and I love that. Um, but does Micro Focus have a good developer experience? I don't know. It's too expensive, and you won't even let me have a trial. You won't let me decide for myself if it's something I even want to use. So how do we do this? Okay, the COBOL programmers that I have come in contact with, and again, this is anecdotal. I admit it, it's anecdotal. They don't want new tools. They don't want to not be on a green screen, 24 by 80. They want it. They love it. They crave it. They reject things like IDZ. They reject things, like not having to submit a JCL job to do stuff. It's because here's the bottom line. Again, I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. If it wasn't resoundingly rejected by the community that it is proposed for, it would have been done in the last 50 years. End of story. Okay. If the community of programmers using COBOL wanted better tools, they would be using better tools already. And I attribute this to the fact that emulating the mainframe on a PC has not been done. Word for word or experience for experience, however you want to look at it. If it's not exactly the same, they don't want it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now I get it. We're entering some commands like our bash scripts and all that. That's not how you do it on a mainframe, but it's pretty dang close. Like it's very small. Just enter this command and it'll be like submitting a JCL job. I'm going to get into later videos. I'm emulating JCL, the way it functions, the way it reports back, the results of the execution of the commands that you wanted to run. I want to emulate a mainframe experience on a PC because it's really the only way to start to get through to COBOL developers, mainframe developers, that there is a better way to improve, or there is a way to improve their quality of life and the way that they work. Once we can improve the quality of life of a developer, we will get better productivity out of the developer. We'll get faster code being written because you can get faster feedback loops on the code you're writing by executing it and seeing it run. And our quality is going to improve. The quality on the COBOL that I have seen is not great because the complexity of the programs is prohibitive to testing efforts. Now, you can do automated testing on a mainframe because it's just code. It's code that runs other code. But again, where are the tool sets? Where are the frameworks for this? There's little to no open source, and anything that costs money is prohibitively expensive. So I'm trying to address these problems. But the main problem is, again, the population of programmers, the mentality of the programmers. If they wanted to change their own environments and their own environment in which they work, they would have already done it. So, Luddite is a word that comes to mind. Again, I know I'm painting with a broad brush and I'm insulting a lot of people at this point, but the reality is the reality. If they wanted to change, they would have already changed. But because we don't have that change, yes, we have a lot of legacy code that still runs with COBOL. That doesn't make it good. That just means the people who could have made the change, and I'm not talking about the bosses, quote unquote, because the bosses are bosses of knowledge workers. Knowledge workers know more about the work they do than their bosses. So the bosses don't know about COBOL programming or programming in general, usually. So if they go to their people and they say, hey, how can we make this better? How can we change? And their people say, you can't, stick with what you got, then guess what? 50 or 60 years later, we're going to be where we are today, which is exactly where we are. We haven't changed. So how do we crack that nut? We start to give them the tools that are very familiar. We give them tools that are different but familiar. Different but familiar. And then maybe we can start to change some minds here. So, okay, that's me ranting for 20 minutes. Again, thank you for the time. Give me some feedback. Contribute to the repo. I mean, seriously, it's like me by myself. This is about 4 months worth of work. I think I've done a lot of stuff. I think some of it's actually pretty cool. Some of it's not great. Some of it's pretty terrible. Not going to lie. Some of it's pretty terrible. But when you're working by yourself, you get what you get. You don't have any feedback that way. So I would love to have some feedback on the code, but from other coders who want to, help contribute to this project, who believe in the mission that I have, which is improve the quality of life of our COBOL developers today. Thank you. Talk to you later.